Oh, mama. Welcome to Button Chops, the podcast where two miserable millennials from Northern England ask, what's the crack with video games? I'm Chris.
And I'm Matthew.
Do you like how I changed that up there?
Yeah, that's pretty sensual.
I'm trying to kind of, jazz it up from week to week, kind of throw new things at people so their poor little ears don't get tired.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary, mate. It was already very jazzy as it was.
Yeah, but that's like the nature of jazz, isn't it? Like, it's just constantly morphing and transforming.
Yeah, breaking through the boundaries of emotions with Oh Mama.
Genuinely comparing me saying Oh Mama at the beginning of a podcast to the genre of jazz music, to the actual art that is jazz. How are you doing this week?
I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine, yeah. How are you?
You sound fine. And you look fine. People who are listening won't realise this, but we're actually looking at each other via webcam, so I can confirm with my eyes that Matthew looks fine, in case you were worried.
I haven't got like scabs all over my head.
Not that I can see. You've got a hat on. They could be under the hat.
Yeah, to be fair.
It could be all scab under that hat.
I've just got like really patchy hair. And Gollum.
It's very suspicious that you're always wearing that hat. What are you trying to hide?
It's turned into an absolute bush.
Or it's scabs.
It's just that it's like a big mullet at this point. It doesn't look very good, so I have to keep a hat on.
I'm glad that I got my hair cut just before lockdown started, because during the first lockdown, my hair got really, really long, and it just looked like a helmet. It looked like a big bushy X-wing pilot helmet.
I thought you were going to say a big bushy X-wing. I was going to say that's a bit weird.
I wish it did. I don't know if you could really style your hair to look like an X-wing,
like the one that Luke pulls out of the swamp. Yeah.
Well, actually, mate, the one he fails to pull out of the swamp, it's Yoda that pulls it out of the swamp. God, you call yourself a Star Wars fan?
No, I said heavy casual.
So, this week we're going to be talking about remake culture in video games. Before we get into it, though, just like last week, another friendly reminder that leaving a review will help the podcast massively. So if you're one of the very tiny, teensy little handful of people who have been tuning in from week to week and have enjoyed any of our half-informed babble, please remember to leave a review because it helps the podcast grow. With that out of the way, let's get into this week's topic. So, remakes in video games. What do you think? Go.
Largely into it. Maybe I like a third of it. And I think when games first started getting remade, I was like, wow, this is good. But there's only so much my nostalgia can be turned into money. You know what I mean?
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks a lot for listening. I was waiting for you to stop talking so I could say. I was like, this is going to be so funny. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it varies, doesn't it? Really, it depends on the remake. It depends on who or how it's being made and what it's a remake of, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, remakes are generally sort of looked down on in popular culture at the minute, aren't they? I mean, more so in like films and stuff, because I mean, I think at this point, people kind of just roll their eyes when they hear Hollywood's churning out another remake of something they loved when they were a kid.
Live action Disney cartoon films.
Yeah. They are literally like just the turds of Hollywood at the minute. The Disney live action remakes. To be fair, I've only seen Cinderella. Don't ask.
I saw Beauty and the Beast. That was pretty good.
Really?
That was all right.
They all sort of get panned, and yet they all make like over $1 billion in box office every single time one drops. Apart from Mulan, obviously, because that came out in the pandemic, and also nobody gives a shit about it. Nobody gives a shit about it.
I think families and stuff obviously like want to take their kids to stuff that they can then connect with their kids through.
Yeah.
You know? So if like a parent that's about 30 now was brought up watching Lion King, and then the Lion King film gets remade to the standard where their kids might actually want to watch it, because maybe some kids and stuff don't really get into proper hardcore cartoons, especially the older ones anymore. Hardcore cartoons like Lion King.
This is a family podcast. We're not talking about any hardcore cartoons this week.
But maybe that's why it is, like families can just take them to see Lion King and be like, oh, come watch this film, it's really good, and then talk to the kids about it afterwards, rather than, taking them to see like something that's, I don't know. I don't really know what the kids' films are like nowadays, but...
Well, I mean, I think when it comes to like films, it's definitely... You're right. I mean, specifically with the Disney films, I think is there's like a nostalgia clock that Disney is sitting waiting to tick out, and then once it hits peak nostalgia, they churn out a remake of something that like people who are now adults who have their own kids they're excited to see a remake of and want to show their kids. But I think when it comes to games, it's sort of a different thing altogether, because technological advancements are a big part of why people remake films. I also like it's a much bigger part of video games because of like they're primarily an interactive medium. And like sometimes, well, I mean, almost all of the time, you go back and play an old game that you loved as a kid and you try and play it today. If you can get a hold of it, because that's part of it, getting a hold of them is really difficult because they're constrained to the medium that they were originally released on a lot of the time. But also they just don't hold up.
Yeah.
You boot up your GameCube and put the Wind Waker on and realize, oh shit, yeah, like this doesn't even output in HD. It's blurry. It looks blurry as shit on my HD TV, and this isn't as good as I remember it being. So I think that definitely does justify to a degree remakes in video games a lot more than like remakes in films and stuff, because like films generally, if it's a really classic film, which a lot of the time like that's what they're remaking like already great films, they hold up. They don't really warrant a remake a lot of the time. The original Lion King is about 10 times better than the animated version of the Lion King by all accounts, because I haven't seen it, but
No, I agree. I think it is definitely the gameplay elements, I think, allow maybe younger audiences to get involved in stories that were established in the 90s-ish. Iconic stories that can't really be matched too well, but are in the exception of, like a couple of games a year, maybe if that. So it allows developers to actually like get those stories out to a new generation, which I think is what it's all about, and provide them with like up-to-date gameplay that's a lot more fun and a lot more easy to get into than like if you give someone like a game from PlayStation 1 that they haven't played, because that is a big ask of people, So it's sad to leave stories so well written sort of like die because you're letting them just go out of date,
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing, like something that was like innovative in the 90s on a PlayStation, for example, which is like where we're seeing a lot of remakes come from now, like the Final Fantasy VII is a prime example. At the time, they were mind-blowing, and that was a period of like massive technological change where you saw the transition from like 2D games into like 3 dimensions. Now that sort of style of gameplay being like directly reproduced just doesn't work.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I mean, Final Fantasy VII was just like, everyone was like, oh, it's like really character driven. It's got like a really good story. And although Final Fantasy like 6 and 5 were really well renowned for that as well, 7 was a bit more like a commercial success. It was the highest budget video game of all time when that was released. And I don't think it's enough to leave that there and be like, well, if people go back to it now, they'll understand the innovation, because video games are ripe with like character driven stories now. It's not good enough to go back to a 3D world that's story driven and understand that that's good, you know what I mean? But with that remake, they've completely brought it up to life with like a really good combat system that blends sort of action and the turn-based RPG elements, and they've brought it to new people.
Do you see it as like a lack of creativity though, to some extent, that game developers aren't just looking to the future and trying to make the next new innovative thing, and are instead sort of looking back to the stuff that was innovative in like the late 90s and saying, well, you love this, so here it is again.
Well, I think it's actually quite a lot to do with like the appetite for the games, and the love of those games, because the Final Fantasy series, again, for example, that's sort of like 7, 8, and 9 are so worshipped that the Square Enix are now find it really difficult to put out new mainline Final Fantasy titles that are received well and have any sort of innovation, because they have done it. You know, the last couple of games like innovated and rechanged the way they approach a Final Fantasy game stylistically and design wise. But every time they put out, people are just like, it's not as good as 7. So then they just go remake 7, you know, and then it becomes one of their most successful games of a few years.
I mean, to be fair, it's kind of crazy that there is so much demand for a remake of something that came out like, what, we're coming up like
1997.
Yeah, so like coming up like nearly 25 years ago, you know, like the fact that there's still that demand for it. I mean, that's not to say that the people who were, I mean, you know, like we were kids when that came out, and we're not dead yet. So, but you know, like that there is such a demand for remakes like Final Fantasy VII, I think is kind of weird. But I mean, the thing with Final Fantasy VII though is that, like, to what extent do you even class that as a remake?
Yeah, no.
Because I mean, it's from the perspective of the story, it's sort of a remake, but it's like it expands it way out, because it's only like the first like fifth or something of like the original game, something like that.
I'd say Final Fantasy VII is a good example of how you can remake a game and still have like creative liberty and innovation.
Yeah.
How far have you got into it now?
I haven't played on it in like 2 weeks.
So you haven't played it since where you were at?
The last bit I was on, that fucking bullshit boss fight with the 3 Venom Mantises.
Oh, yeah.
In, I don't know what the area is called. It's like the second little town that you go to with Aerith.
Yeah.
You've got to help that old man visit his wife's grave or something. You got to go and pay your respect.
Oh, yeah. One of the dumb side quests.
My God, that boss fight was bullshit. And it made me so angry that like I beat it, but then I think I went and did what's the boss called? One with the bald head and the glasses.
I can't remember his name.
I'm gonna call him Jerry. I had the boss fight with Jerry.
Glasses man.
Jerry Bald Glasses. I was fighting Jerry Bald Glasses. And then that was getting on my nerves as well, because what I think was really pissing me off is they've retained the elements. This isn't going to turn into a review of Final Fantasy VII, my review of Final Fantasy VII, but this is a brief tangent. I've gotten to a point in the game where the turn-based elements are kind of, I feel like, are locking horns with the in-the-moment sort of action combat in a way that doesn't work for me. Like the fact that enemies can keep spamming you with sleep spells and then poisoning you, and then you get out, you know, the status effect wears off and you go back and then they put you to sleep again. And like, it's like, well, what is the point of having the in the moment action when I'm being sort of pulled out of it with these turn-based elements? And I'm definitely shit at the game, but yeah, that was my review of Final Fantasy VII.
Discussion ended.
Yeah, so that's where I'm up to in it, and I mean, I obviously haven't played the original one, so I can't really compare the story. But again, like having spoken about it on the podcast before and read countless reviews, like I know that this is only like a small portion of the original game. Yeah. So I guess like where I'm kind of going with that is going back to what I was saying about how remakes in films I don't really think are comparable to remakes in video games, because you have so much more time to work with, first of all, with a video game. Like films generally have to adhere to like a 2 to 3 hour if you're really pushing it sort of structure, they have, films have structural elements that are sort of expected as part of the medium, like a 3-act structure that it, like, clearly defines each section and has some sort of like neat arc and resolution at the end. Like, video games don't necessarily have to hew to that in the same kind of way. And I think like
No.
you can do remakes in video games a lot more artfully, and something like Final Fantasy VII is a pure example of that, because it's a remake really in name only. It's like a completely different game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like the bit for me, and this isn't really spoilery, is like it's self-referential in its change, and the more you get into it, I think you start to notice that the game like understands that you want it to stay faithful. So it's like a journey of fate. And the fate is that you end up on the same path as the original game. But there's elements of the game that try and stop you from... try and keep you on that path, because they're the player's will. They're the will of Final Fantasy fans, like embodied in the video game. But the game sort of like battles with itself to try and pull out of that, to try and tell a different story.
That's kind of cryptic. I'm not really sure I'm following, but I obviously don't have the perspective on it that you have. But I think like that's interesting. So you're saying it's like the remake is essentially trying not to be a remake while also being a remake in its story.
It's teeing up the fact that maybe 2 and 3, part 2 and 3, which will probably be the case, are able to tell other stories, and the fishing bit for fans is to try and see if it is going to stick to the original, and you want to play it to try and like get it to the point where you get to relive the original game. But the game and people within the game and forces within the game want to do something else, and it's like it starts to reference itself more as the game goes on. So that's one of the reasons I really like it as a remake, because by the end it's not Final Fantasy VII anymore. There's things happening that are fundamentally completely different, and it starts to open up like multiverse sort of
that's interesting
questions. So by the end, you're sort of seeing the original tale with about 3 or 4 other elements trying to drive it in different directions, which is good to me. I mean, it upset people and excited people. It'll upset people if things that originally happened didn't, but there's tragic moments in the original plot towards the end that maybe can be avoided if it's retold.
Well, I think you've sort of hit on something there that I think is a fundamental issue with certain remakes. And I mean, it's essentially because the stuff that gets remade is in the main stuff that people have like a lot of affection for, like a deep nostalgia for, and that in and of itself can constrain things creatively when it's too sort of slavishly following like the source material and not like allowing itself to sort of creatively be its own thing. And that is in part due to sort of like toxic fandoms, like purists who are like, you can't do this in this, you can't do, you can't have Luke say that he renounces the Force. How can you do that? Obviously not a remake, The Last Jedi, but I mean, it's springboarding off an original trilogy that people have got like a fanatical devotion to, and also it's a sequel to a film that is just essentially a stealthy remake of Star Wars. But the point being, like, does it sort of inhibit creativity in the storytelling by being too sort of devoted to pleasing fans?
I think it depends on the on how the game wants to present itself and how it. So the last point of Final Fantasy there is that that's the mission, and it's very clear that that's the story of Final Fantasy VII Remake now. So they're able to now do whatever they want, whereas Resident Evil 3 potentially pretty faithful to the original game, if anything slightly expanded potentially like gameplay wise, but they like skipped by the clock tower section, which upset fans. But they didn't skip it because they were retelling a story, or there was a different version of things, or they wanted to retell the story of Resident Evil 3 in any sort of way, because it was a very faithful game. It just sort of just got ignored. So they didn't. So for that, that's it. When you're trying to tell a remake, so by the book, and then you just skip an entire section, of course that's going to upset people, because your mission and what you were presenting to fans was that you were going to give them an up-to-date version of a game that they love, you know?
Yeah, and I think like that is the point, that video games justify themselves. Video game remakes, justify themselves because, again, going back to what I was saying before, like there is so much more scope to kind of just like riff off and kind of do their own thing, but then you're inevitably going to end up upsetting people.
Yeah.
I think it might be worth sort of going into what do you define as a remake and what do you define as a remaster, because I think when you look specifically, I'm thinking of the Demon Souls remake here. A lot of people refuse to recognize that as a remake. They're calling it a remaster, whereas for me, like, I do see that as a remake, even though it is incredibly faithful to the original one.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your sort of like view on that? Does it even really matter to you whether it's a remake or a remaster?
I think it's a good way to understand what the game's trying to sell to you before you can actually provide like a critical view of whether you're enjoying it or not. And for that, I'd say like a remaster is generally like just a HD reissue of a game. The core code and everything remains the same, but textures are just improved.
The Nintendo effect.
Yeah, frame rates and textures are improved as a general core. And I'd say a remake is something that's more bringing something into a different generation, often building something with entirely fresh code to completely rebuild an atmosphere. Rebuild the assets as well to like sit alongside the games that are coming out of that same period. So that's why Demon Souls is one of many examples where they sort of like, they don't know whether they're quite a remaster or a remake, because there's remasters which are quite lazy, like, and like Devil May Cry series just being reported for like the PlayStation, like even that DMC spin-off they did, was it came out on like PS3 and then they put a HD version out on the PS4, like when the PS4 came out. It's just like, it just came out 4 months ago, just leave it. You know what I mean? But I'd say Demon Souls treads quite finely between those two. Because if you're remaking a game, you're expecting a new game. Almost as if that first game never came out and this is a new game that's coming out that month to the same standard as every other game, you know?
And I mean, like, for all intents and purposes, like things like Resident Evil 2, like that was a new game. I see that as a new game.
Yeah, definitely. That's absolutely a remake. That's a definition of a remake, I think. A faithful remake. Because there's no way it doesn't even slightly touch into any of its source code, really. It's just a retelling of the same story.
I mean, if you haven't guessed already, I'm totally for video game remakes. Just fucking remake everything. I don't care. You know,
I like remakes, and you know when it's an anniversary and a moment, and you're bringing something back from like 15, 20 years, 10 years even. And there's a lot of nostalgia brought up, but it doesn't take away from the original game. I think what I don't like about remake culture is the remastering element, because I think dragging a game forward through generations takes away any nostalgia. If anything, it doesn't bring it forward, because you just have a different time frame for a game that existed at a certain period in your life.
Yeah,
you know.
Well,
like I want to go back and play the games that I played when I was 16 or when I was 12 as they were at that period. I thought that's the point of like PS5 having backwards compatibility. I want to go back and just play the original frame rate and the original graphics and go as if this is what this game was like then. I loved this game then. But instead, like when there's 3 or 4 reissues across multiple consoles, you instead just go to the newest reissue, and then it's like a bit cleaner and the frame rate's better. I mean, you don't get the same nostalgia kick because you're reliving a game that technically is up to the standards of a couple of years ago.
That's kind of interesting, because the Super Mario 3D All-Stars, I think, is a prime example of what was considered a lazy remaster, in that there definitely was, the Super Mario Sunshine and Galaxy were HD remasters with improved textures and whatever. And there was improved like textures and stuff in Super Mario 64, but for all intents and purposes, like that was capped at 720, and it basically was just the Super Mario 64. It was the Nintendo 64 version of Super Mario 64 playable on a Switch, and people complained about that because they were like, "This is lazy. Like, why couldn't you improve the graphics? Why couldn't you, put a little bit more care and attention into, for example, like it was in like a 4:3 aspect ratio, like an old CRT TV. It wasn't even given like a widescreen treatment. Now, like personally, I'm more on your side with that, where I kind of appreciated that I was more or less playing it the way it was played on the 64, except, like on a better screen. And with, Switch's Joy-Cons, which debatable whether they work as well for 64, because 64 was designed to be played on a Nintendo 64 controller. But I kind of like the idea that I'm playing something the way it was intended to be played. And I agree, constantly reissuing things to some extent does sort of cheapen it because it's so easily accessible. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, these things should be accessible, because especially you want to watch a film, you can get it on DVD, you can get it on Blu-ray, you can download it digitally. Like films are very, very accessible, whereas video games are all access to older video games is limited a lot of the time to the hardware it was on, if you can get a hold of it, and whether you can even get it to run, I don't know where I'm falling down on this. I feel like I'm just babbling at this point.
No, you're right. I think it's like when you try and do a remaster, which is what that Mario game is. If you don't do it well enough, then you might as well have not done it, because people can just go play the original game and get the same nostalgia kick.
But can they though? Because I mean, Super Mario 64 is available obviously on the original Nintendo 64. I mean, how many people still have the Nintendo 64 for one thing? You go on eBay and look for a Nintendo 64 now, you're looking at like 80 quid for the console, more with games. You have no guarantee that it's going to work. And also, they don't play very well on HD TVs. They're like SCART outputs. So you might be looking at having to get an adapter to play it on your HD TV. If you do that, you're playing it on an HD TV. They're not designed to output on that kind of TV, so the graphics inherently look different. Like one thing I found, like I said earlier, when I had my last GameCube, I hooked it up to my HD TV, which it was an older TV, so it still had a CRT, like a SCART input, so I could plug it in, but it looked like shit. Something to do with the video encoder or whatever, techno babble. Insert techno jargon here. But you're never going to get that same experience that you had when you played it at the time of its release, because there's so many more factors than just the fact that you had that game. You had a certain type of TV, you were a certain age. There's all the accessibility of it at the time was a lot more different to what it's like now. But that isn't to say that people shouldn't be able to get those games if they don't want, especially when it can't be that difficult for these huge companies like Sony and Xbox to just build backwards compatibility into their consoles and then make them widely available, even digitally. It's just like an excuse to print money.
Yeah. It's been the same disc format for the entirety of PlayStation's life. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to put up, I say no reason, like I understand the technical side of it, but there's very little reason why the PS1 disc shouldn't be able to work in a PS5 console. Does it? I thought they were doing backwards compatibility. Or was that until back to PS3, is it?
PS4 plays on PS5.
But not PS3?
I think apparently, from what I understand, like the sort of the architecture of a PS3 is really weird and individualistic, to the point that like even developers at the time struggled to develop for PS3, and then they kind of radically changed it for the PS4, which is why you can't play PS3 games on a PS4.
Yeah. Yeah.
But obviously, you can get some PS3 games to play on PS4 and PS5 off the PlayStation Store.
Yeah.
But like, for example, in lockdown, when I decided to do my tour of the Metal Gear Solid games, which I mean, like, we could get into that because I was playing, in some cases, playing like remasters, and in one case, playing the digital version of the original Metal Gear Solid. But I had to buy a PS3 just so I could play Metal Gear Solid HD Collection and Metal Gear Solid 4, because the only other way to play them was to stream them on PlayStation Now, and that did not work well with my internet.
Yeah. What? So Bluepoint were apparently remaking the Metal Gear Solid 1 game, right? Oh, it's rumored.
It's rumored, yeah. So they, hang on, let me just get this up. They posted a tweet, I think end of 2019.
Yeah.
Bluepoint obviously being like the remakers of Demon's Souls, the remakers of Shadow of the Colossus, and they're a studio that I think started doing remasters. Like Bluepoint actually did the Metal Gear Solid HD Collection remasters.
Yeah, they did the Shadow of the Colossus one as well, and Ico.
Yeah, like the original remaster before it was
remade.
So they tweeted, what's the date? I think this was like October 2019. So well before anybody knew they were making Demon's Souls. So calm this spooky night, a symphony of rumours, not one, but two, return from shadow. A resistance to dart home as black monsters escape twisted hills to wander lands and siphon souls. Filter your candy collection, soft from solid, and be eco-friendly. Have a metal Halloween. So straight away reading there, I can see a reference to Metal Gear Solid, soft from solid, have a metal Halloween. A reference to Souls. Some people think that they might be doing a remake of Siphon Filter. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever played Siphon Filter, but
I had it when I was very young. I think it was one of those first games that I was like a bit too scared to play, even though it wasn't scary.
And also, people I think that it's a Castlevania, potentially a Castlevania. Is it Castlevania Symphony? Of
I don't know about that.
Symphony of Castles. Symphony of Scary.
Symphony of Vanias.
Symphony of Scary Castle Men.
Symphony of Man with Sword kills things.
Castlevania Symphony of the Big Scary Vampire Men. It's called Symphony of the Night.
So it looks like it.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, I think, obviously, Demon's Souls was announced not long after that. There's rumours that Sony are looking to acquire Bluepoint so that they can just make PlayStation exclusives, with them being primarily a remake company. It seems likely that Sony are going to have them remake all of like the big hitters from their past catalogue. I don't know if Siphon Filter counts as one of those, but definitely I think the next one everyone's expecting is a remake of Metal Gear Solid, which I would love, because
I think I'd really like that. But what would you want from it? Like, would you want it to be quite faithful, like sort of top downy, or would you want
not in gameplay? No. Well, that already kind of exists. Have you heard of Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes? The GameCube version, which I'm eyeing on eBay at the minute, and it's like it's like 80 quid. It's like 80 quid to get a copy of Twin Snakes, which is fucking insane. But you know, obviously GameCube, not a lot of people had them, and even less people bought the Twin Snakes. But yeah, we kind of already have that with the Twin Snakes, which is only available on GameCube. But I don't think that they could make a remake that's faithful in gameplay to the original, because the original stealth mechanics are just unbelievably simplistic, and it wouldn't work. You know, like their remakes of Shadow of the Colossus and Demon's Souls are very faithful, but they're still, in relative terms, recent compared to Metal Gear Solid, which was like 97 or 98.
Yeah.
Like, and you play that now, and it's like Snake can literally run past a guard, but just because he's outside of his cone of vision, he doesn't see him, you know?
Well, to be fair, that's not much different to half of the stealth games nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I think Metal Gear Solid, the original Metal Gear Solid, does stealth better than like fucking even things like Ghost of Tsushima. But yeah, I think what I would expect is something similar to the gameplay of Metal Gear Solid 5, but in the setting and story of Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah. Something a bit more free-flowing. That's even just like the camera and stuff, like being able to rotate around and be a bit more explorative.
That's what I mean, yeah. I want like the same environments and stuff, like rebuilt and obviously repurposed to make more complicated stealth viable.
Yeah.
But just the variety of approaches that you could take in sort of Metal Gear Solid 5 and just the depth of the stealth mechanics, I think I would love to see that, but with the story of the original Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, that would be really good.
Which I think would be an interesting departure for Blue Point, really, because their remakes have been faithful.
Yeah, I'd say it was more like, like your Capcom with Resident Evil and things like that, where they're a bit more the in-house devs, which have pushed the boat out a little bit with their IPs, whereas Blue Point, even that, like I was looking at Blue Point's like list of games like before this, and across the board, like got a couple of big hitters, but then generally it was just like a couple of HD remasters, and it feels like they've now like stepped up their remastering, but they've kept to original gameplay code, but they've polished up completely new assets and things in games. Yeah. So instead of just polishing up the same hills and things like that, instead they've added detail, they've put in a ton more assets, especially into like Shadow of the Colossus versus their own remaster. That game has like looked really outstanding, especially when it came out.
To be honest, I think the announcement of that is probably imminent.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll see it actually come out until maybe next year, but read I don't know, some leaks. I don't know how truthful they are, how accurate they are rather, but they've been developing Demon Souls and Metal Gear Solid at the same time. But I would imagine if they're doing something along the lines of like completely rebuilding the gameplay for Metal Gear Solid, which I think they have to, because you just can't use the original gameplay in a modern game. It's going to take a lot longer. So
yeah,
but I really, really hope we get that.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you really want to see remade?
I really want. Did you ever play Dino Crisis?
I think I did.
It's like Resident Evil, but with dinosaurs.
No, I remember it. I don't know if I actually played. I feel like I did. Right. So you know how in a previous episode I mentioned like my dad's mate who had like a fucking dodgy PlayStation, and every time I'd go around, he'd have like loads of pirated games. I'm pretty sure I saw him playing Dino Crisis at his as well. Yeah,
I think I had Dino Crisis chipped on PS1. Did you ever have like a chipped PS1?
Yeah, we had a chipped PS1.
I swear, like one of the neighbours on my estate used to just put like a spring in the back bit that like kept the disc tray open. And looking back, I don't know why that's an important part of having a chipped PlayStation 1. So everyone on my estate in Middlesbrough had chipped PS1s, but you could always tell because you'd go around the house and the disc tray would be like held open. Yeah. But how would that make any difference?
Middlesbrough logic.
It was like the entire school had like chipped PlayStations with these disc trays just like risen a bit. Looking back now, I don't even understand what chip in a PlayStation 1 even was. I reckon it was all just a hoax. I reckon they all worked.
I don't know. I haven't got a fucking clue. Like I just knew it as chipping it. Yeah. That was it. You got a chip PlayStation. Aye. That's what it is.
For a little Tesco disc and a Sharpie written on the front, scribbled. Yeah. Crash Bandicoot 1 and 2.
And a horrible like home print out of like the artwork, and it's been cut with scissors.
Oh yeah. And they used to get soggy. They used to get like soggy and start peeling off.
Those were the days. Those were the good old days.
Yeah, that was good. I had Dino Crisis in that format, I think. And I thought that game was like so terrifying. It was a proper like it was just Resident Evil with dinosaurs. But I think, like, looking at how well Resident Evil 2 went down, I reckon they could really do a good job of it. Because they'd be able to just use those same mechanics, like third person over the shoulder, spooky atmosphere, terrifying dinosaurs. I can't even remember dinosaurs ever being done well in video games, ever. You know? Like the feeling of, being hunted by something that's like...
What about Turok?
Oh, it was all right. It was good.
I don't remember playing Turok. I just remember the word Turok.
I had the PS3 one for that. That was all right. King Kong, the film video game was pretty
Peter
good.
Jackson's King Kong.
Yeah, that was all right. That
was it?
Yeah, he just used to punch like those dinosaurs and stuff.
Class. That sounds so good.
You run around with like spears and like chuck them around and ping people, and it's quite survivally.
Ping people.
But I think with Dino Crisis, I think it hasn't got the audience to be fully remade, and Capcom to invest.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, Resident Evil is Resident Evil. Right? I don't think as many people remember Dino Crisis. I don't know whether they would feel that there was the demand for that, which is a shame, really.
Yeah, I know there's been heavy rumors for it, and I think like if they sort of tackled it as like. Maybe like it's just a new game and sort of marketed it as a new game, but it was a remake of the original game. I think that could go down really well because I think there's an appetite within the industry to play a dinosaur game. No one's really ever played one.
Yeah. I mean, if it's done well, then definitely. I think people definitely would want that.
Yeah, the velociraptors and stuff on Dino Crisis is terrifying. Like you go through like a corridor or something. Well, it'd be a corridor, but it'd be outside. Like a mud path, and then they just like lunge out of like the bushes, and you imagine like a really well done like Last of Us 2 level sort of forest environment full of like dinosaurs hunting you and stuff, but in the Resident Evil sort of terror. It'd be so good. Like, and it's just never been done. So, but that's definitely my wish. And my other one that I had on my list was Metal Gear Solid 1, just because I really want to play them again, and I sort of want to play Metal Gear Solid 1 first, and before the podcast, before you said that the original one sort of still holds up, and we had that chat about playing the original games in their original format, I thought that I wanted to play like a remake of it and then go back to 2, 3, 4. I never really played Metal Gear Solid 1, to be honest. I never completed it. I got like a little bit into the base. I could when it first came out, I couldn't even get past that first like screen. I got to the lift sometimes if I could pluck up the courage.
No, I think I remember when I was young. I swear to God, right? I think we were talking about this. I said that there was a demo of the opening bit on Demo 1 for Metal Gear Solid. But then I went online and had a look at the different Demo 1s that were available, and I couldn't find one that had a playable Metal Gear Solid demo on it. There was like one that had like a cinematic trailer or something. Well, cinematic, but like it had some cutscene footage or whatever from it. I couldn't seem to find one online that definitely had playable demo of Metal Gear Solid. So I'm wondering whether I maybe got like a magazine or something with a demo on it. I definitely had a demo of that opening bit, and I couldn't get past it when I was a kid.
Maybe that's actually what I had as well, because I think I remember sometimes being able to get to the lift, but then when the lift was going up and you watched the cutscene, that you couldn't then get past that bit in the demo. Am I right?
Yeah, because I think like that was the demo, is just get to the lift, and that was the end of that bit.
Yeah.
But playing it again last year, I mean, it's just unfathomably easy. Like, I was still sort of impressed with how sophisticated it was for the time. Like you can't, you run everywhere. Like you can't crouch, and like crouch walk, and you can't sort of like creep. So your sort of modern stealth brain is thinking, oh, well, if I run, the guards will hear my footsteps, but they don't. But there's stuff like, in that opening bit, there's like puddles and stuff, and if you run through the puddle, you leave footsteps behind you, and then the guards notice the footsteps and follow you.
I love I loved leaving the footsteps in the snow. It's like, whose footprints are these? And you just do it over and over again.
What was that noise?
And it's just, they had like the same voice on repeat for all the soldiers. So you just like get them all together and you just, it'd like delay it and it'd be like, whose footprints are these? Whose footprints are these?
Yeah, that was like the extent of the AI from 1998.
Yeah. You know what I loved on Metal Gear Solid 1? The VR missions.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved them. But I got through all of them when I was a kid, but I never completed the game.
There was a point, I think, where I was like screaming at my TV on the Metal Gear Rex fight when I played it last year. That final, it's not the final boss, but the like the second phase of the boss fight with Metal Gear Rex is so difficult. It's so hard.
I really like the old Metal Gear fights. I think they were like the first feelings of like almost what you have with Shadow of the Colossus, and now like quite a common theme where it's just like huge bosses. Even like Metal Gear Ray in 2, when you get to the beach.
So in Metal Gear Solid 2, there is like a bit in Metal Gear Arsenal where you fight loads of Metal Gear Rays and you have to destroy like 9 of them.
And you've got like a javelin launcher or something.
Yeah. And that is like an endurance fight where it's like you've got to survive and destroy like something like 9 Metal Gear Rays before the boss fight won't end. It just keeps going. And it's because like sometimes you'll nearly destroy one and then it'll go away and another one will replace it with a full health bar. So it's like you have to focus your energy on specifically destroying 9 of them, otherwise you could be there potentially forever fighting Metal Gear Rays, which is wild. It's at times frustrating, but kind of an exciting boss fight.
Yeah, I'd quite like to see those original bosses in Metal Gear fights like remade. That's all. I didn't like one of the biggest downfalls for me of Metal Gear Solid 5 was whatever, I can't remember what it's called. That one, the one that sort of runs around.
Sahelanthropus.
No, that's no wonder I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, I can barely fucking say it.
That boss fight, it was like sort of like turned into like a Transformers game, and the atmosphere of that fight didn't really feel like classic Metal Gear boss fight.
Yeah, the thing, 3 I think is the pinnacle of Metal Gear boss fights, but Metal Gear Solid 5, I feel like lost a lot of the... There was always like a conceit or a specific thing that you had to do in a boss fight, like, or there was multiple sort of interesting ways to tackle a boss fight, and that was sort of just completely gone in Metal Gear Solid 5, which was really one really big black mark against that game for me, because you've got like the skulls unit and that, and they're just bullet sponges, you know, like there's no sort of interesting, clever way to kill them. It's just, you just got to shoot them a lot.
Yeah, and you don't even fight them once. It's just the same fight multiple times in different places. And even the locations and stuff aren't really varied enough to justify that.
Whereas like in Metal Gear Solid 3, one of my favourite ones in Metal Gear Solid 3 is the fight with the Fear. And he's jumping around in the rooftop, in the rooftops. You know, in the rooftops of the jungle. He's jumping around in the rooftops of the jungle. And he uses his stamina really quickly, so he stops to eat, but you can throw rotten food down and he'll run up and eat the rotten food, and then you give him food poisoning, and then he's like, for the rest of the fight, like he's just like hobbled, and it's just really easy to beat him. There's just tons of little things like that in Metal Gear Solid 3, like just purely creative, like brilliant little wrinkles to the gameplay that is lost in some of the later Metal Gear Solid games.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think if Blue Point can, you know, capture that, you know, like, I mean, like, how are Blue Point going to redo the Psycho Mantis fight, you know? In the original one, that fight is built for the PlayStation, you know, because you've got your memory card, and he stops and goes, "You've been playing Castlevania." And he'll, you know, you have to change controller port in order for him to not be able to read your mind. Like, how are they going to recreate that? I don't know, but I would be disappointed if they remade the game without that sort of sense of jaunty fun. Is jaunty a word? I don't know.
Yeah, they could they could do something like, incorporate some sort of element where it might not be essential, but like as borderline an Easter egg where, if you logged into a second controller and change your user, that it like references that, and maybe that sort of guides you along somehow. They could be creative with it. I wouldn't expect them to, but it could be cool to sort of incorporate an element like that.
They'll find a way if they're making it. I mean, I guess it's probably worth just reiterating that this is definitely not confirmed. Like, they might not even be making it, but I think people generally believe they are.
Yeah, we don't want all of our listeners going off on Twitter and being like, can't wait for Metal Gear Solid 1, pre-ordering it.
I don't know who I've paid.
We should make a store and just like list like fake pre-orders and just announce games.
Yeah. Let's commit fraud. You know what would be a really good idea, mate? Committing fraud.
Go pre-order the Metal Gear Solid 1 remake now at buttonchops.com. What else would be on your wish list then? Out and out? Anything?
Out. Just Metal Gear Solid.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wanted to talk about, specifically Zelda remasters, which I think would be maybe a good segue into the other little segment that we were going to talk about this week, which was the first Nintendo Direct in about 7 years, which happened last week, or whenever this episode ends up going out. It was the week. Look at a calendar. Google it. See the date. That was when it came out. And obviously, I tuned in expecting there to be some sort of big Zelda announcement because it's 35th anniversary of Zelda, and there was maybe some disappointment there.
You wanted Wind Waker, right? Amongst many other people also wanting Wind Waker.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually it's my birthday coming up, and for my birthday, I'm being given a GameCube, and I've bought a Wind Waker for the GameCube, so I'm gonna be
being given a GameCube like it's a donation.
I'm having a birthday donation of a GameCube, so I'm gonna replay the original Zelda on the Wind Waker on the GameCube. But one of the main reasons I bought my Switch was kind of looking at the stuff that was released on the Wii U and thinking, well, all that's going to come out on the Switch as well, because Nintendo are known for reissuing their games all the time. And so far, nothing. There was no word on Wind Waker, a Twilight Princess sort of HD remasters for the Switch in this Nintendo Direct. And instead, we're getting a HD remake of the Skyward Sword.
The Skyward Sword even bad? Why is this bad news?
I have to kind of preface, I haven't played Skyward Sword, so I'm not saying that I'm not looking forward to that, because I think like it'll be cool to get to play it. But people don't really like it because it used Wii motion controls.
Right.
A lot of people found it difficult to play. Also, apparently, it involves a lot of backtracking and sort of going back to the same areas over and over, and like repeated boss fights and stuff. So people are kind of like, it's a bloated, difficult to control mess. Some people are kind of like brave defenders of the game who are kind of going out on Twitter and being like, I love Skyward Sword, which is fair enough. But I just think it's kind of odd that it's the 35th anniversary of Zelda this year, and at the very that Nintendo are reissuing Skyward Sword in HD, charging full price for it, which like here is like 50 quid or like $60 in America. They're doing some Skyward Sword Joy-Cons. You know, like they're making a big deal out of the fact that they're re-releasing the least liked 3D Zelda game.
Yeah.
And not releasing the two most, the ones that people want the most, you know, Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, and Wind Waker, of which they already have existing ports for Wind Waker and Twilight Princess that were released on the Wii U that should be so easy to move onto the Switch. Like, why? Why?
Yeah, there's already one too many games coming out on Switch this year. They only like to release about 3 every 12 months.
I mean, so there's a games journalist, Andy Robinson, I I think he writes for VGC, who tweeted saying that the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess remakes is still definitely coming, and that I don't know. I'm guessing it might have something to do with COVID, that it's just interrupted Nintendo's release schedule in some way. But still, charging like full price for an HD remaster of a game nobody wants. Like, I think at the very least, like, they should be bundling it with a couple of other games. I feel like that's pretty fucking cheeky.
But this is like, I don't want to deviate this from the Nintendo Direct thing. Maybe we'll actually give Nintendo Direct a good solid bit of time. But this actually links back to what I was saying before about like remake and remaster culture, where Nintendo Switch especially is like almost a remake console. It's the store is full of like Burnout Paradise for 30 quid or whatever. Like these like somewhat even obscure games that came out a few years ago that it's like, oh well, that really good game that came out a few years now handheld, here it is for 40 quid. Like it's they've got in that habit of it. So of course they're gonna like trickle out their remakes at full price, and they'll always be at full price. Like I haven't seen a Nintendo first party game go down in price on the Switch store ever. You know?
Yeah, like Nintendo games don't seem to depreciate in value. Like it's Nintendo. They're like,
yeah, they're timeless.
They're timeless, and nobody else can do what they do. And I think if you want to play Nintendo games, it's a closed loop. You know, you can only play Nintendo games on Nintendo consoles. So why would they make their price?
But you say that, but you're frustrated about
Well, yeah, because I think it's inherently anti-consumer. You know, like they know what they're doing.
Yeah,
it's fucking like to me, it's the same sort of shit that like Apple pulls, where it's your iPhone is designed to fuck up after 2 years of use, and you have to get a new one, and they know that you can only get you put everything with Apple. Like I've got a fucking MacBook and an iPhone and loads of stuff in iCloud. You know, I can only really go to Apple for those products now because I'm sort of stuck on that tit.
Yeah.
I'm stuck feeding off that tit, and I can't get off it, you know. And it's the same with Nintendo. They know what they're doing, but like it's still like I should still be able to criticize them for it. It's bullshit.
Yeah. Do you think maybe you're okay with it as long as they balance it out with like satisfying your wishes, i.e. with Wind Waker?
I didn't mind paying 50 quid for the Super Mario 3D All-Stars because it was 3 games. The same time, that is now coming up to the point where it's no longer available. It's only available till March.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that is another bullshit anti-consumerist tactic that Nintendo pulls, where they go, you have to buy this, buy it at release, buy it now, because it won't be available in a few months. You know, like that's fucking stupid. But Skyward Sword, like, yes, I would like to play Skyward Sword, and yes, because I'm a shill. I'm stuck on the Nintendo tit. I'll buy Skyward Sword probably, even though I'm complaining about it, because I want to play it, even though I'm not as jazzed for it. But like, why is it not part of a collection with a bunch of other Zelda games?
Yeah.
You know. Anyway, I guess that is going back to the topic of the week, remasters. That is another sort of, it's a downer to the idea of a remaster. There's probably not a whole lot of work going into doing these, and yet you're getting charged full price every couple of years to play these old games again.
Yeah, I'd quite like to see some of the Zelda games like remade in the Breath of the Wild engine.
It would be really nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not going to happen. That's what I mean, though. But you're even sort of sympathising with Nintendo on it, where it's like, oh well, your games are timeless, so they're just going to be like, well, people still want to pay for this. So
I'm not sympathising. I'm just attempting to explain why Nintendo get away with pulling the shit that they do. You know, I don't agree. I don't think it's a good thing.
Yeah,
by any stretch. You know, I think that they should be making their old games available, because they're not just like good old games, like they're pieces of gaming history. And like in some cases, like for example, if you subscribe to Nintendo's online service, it's not that expensive. It's like £3 a month or something like that, and
yeah,
you get access to their NES and SNES emulators. So like in the time I've had a Switch, I've played like A Link to the Past and Super Metroid and a bunch of like old classic games. I think that's pretty cool. I think it's a bit of a shame that they haven't done that for the Nintendo 64 and the GameCube and stuff. Surely that must be possible, especially since the versions of the Mario remasters were just emulations.
Yeah.
So they have this technology available to emulate their older consoles.
Yeah.
There's no reason that they shouldn't be able to make that available.
Yeah, you can get like 64 emulators on your laptop and things.
Well, there's that. I mean, there's a whole sort of industry online of, free game emulators and stuff.
Yeah.
Which I've never really tried doing, to be honest.
I had a Game Boy one, but at the time I didn't have a MacBook. I had like an old Windows computer, and I couldn't really. There was DS ones, but they wouldn't really run on my computer.
I had a bit of like a collection of like old consoles a couple of years back, and then I got addicted to tidying up with Marie Kondo and got rid of them all. I sold my GameCube for like 10 quid and now massively regret it. So I'm now at a point where I'm thinking about building up a collection of like old Nintendo consoles.
Yeah.
Specifically Nintendo, because I don't know, I feel like through like the PlayStation Store, like getting older games and stuff is always more accessible. And I also feel like there isn't as much of a sort of intrinsic value to like PlayStation and Xbox and stuff.
No,
like you can pick up a 360 insanely cheap online.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of like having older Nintendo stuff and playing it in the way it was intended to be played.
Yeah, definitely. That was the point we made at the start, wasn't it? With like playing the games, even the actual game files as originally intended, the original frame rates, but also like the nostalgia that we could get off, like, having a 64, putting the cartridges in, having a Game Boy, having those Game Boy cartridges. Like it adds to the value of the nostalgia. You don't need like, PlayStation with a stupid PlayStation Store, like downloading a game onto your flash PS4 that runs a lot faster. It's not the same nostalgia.
I love that Nintendo still use cartridges and there is just something really magical about it. I mean, that sounds so fucking lame, but like there is something really magical about the way like game ownership. I almost sort of liken it to listening to vinyl. Like the physical formats that things were issued in cartridges and in their original packaging. There's something really just like, ooh, about it.
Yeah, remember the old like Game Boy cases where they were like, they were like cardboardish, weren't they?
Cardboard boxes,
and they had like these like really quite thick manuals in them, and they were like proper heavy, color print. Like you can go through it, read about a story and everything. It was so good, but like the effort that went into what was inside was never matched by the cardboard thing, and the cardboard box always sort of like just slowly fell apart.
That's why like now you can, if you can get like original Game Boy games in like good condition cardboard boxes, like the original cardboard boxes, like the price that they go for secondhand online is nuts.
Yeah, because someone's had to keep them in like an airtight bag.
So it's not been like eaten by lice. Have you ever watched Scott the Woz on YouTube?
No.
He does a lot of he makes like videos where he just looks at like all sorts of like retro gaming type stuff. Like he looks at like video game packaging through the ages, or he looks at like old like E3s, or I'll send you some stuff online. Like his videos are really good. Like they're funny, but they're really informative as well.
Yeah, I'm into it. I've completely forgotten until I just mentioned it that Game Boy games even came in like little cardboard boxes.
Yeah. I mean, I think like all games used to come in. Well, not all games, but like Nintendo games specifically, Sega games. I think up until like maybe the Genesis. I think like they were doing like they kind of transitioned to sort of plastic boxes. I definitely think because I had a Sega Mega Drive when I was a kid, and I'm pretty sure that had plastic boxes, but like all Nintendo stuff used to come in cardboard boxes. Nintendo 64 did.
Yeah.
Even when my PlayStation was doing like CD jewel cases and stuff.
They were horrible though. They fell apart more than the cardboard boxes.
The PlayStation 2 as well, when that sort of transitioned to DVD cases, I didn't like that either.
Yeah, that was weird at first.
But I do like Nintendo GameCube cases. Well, they're like the DVD size cases, but they have like obviously the mini disc thing inside. They have like a little slot for your dinky little Nintendo GameCube memory card. But also I like the design on the sleeves.
I love that like memory card holder actually, because it was all about, like popping around your mates with a game on it and taking your data with you and having that sort of community experience around the game. I don't need that anymore, do they?
Nobody ever leaves the house now.
Popping around your mates with your 2 terabyte external hard drive full of games. But yeah, I think that like sort of ends that thing a bit quite well, where I think, when you talk about remasters, I'd rather go back and experience something for the full nostalgia of it. Have the full physical experience of playing the game with the original format than a lazy remaster. But I'm all for a remake. I'm all for a remake of bringing up like important stories and bringing older games forward for new people to experience. Because like yourself, like you're playing Final Fantasy VII now. You didn't play it when it was out, but you wouldn't have went back really and played it on PS1. Maybe now you will because you got the context of it enough to drive you, but it's too old. So people needed that and need many other games. Resident Evil 2 will be played by loads of people. I think a remake is a really good thing, and they can come infrequently, but a remaster every 2 months from whatever came out last generation isn't nostalgia. It came out 4 years ago on the original format. We don't need it. Yeah. I'd rather focus on like trying to, like you were saying there, trying to get hold of original formats of games that I really enjoyed playing when I was a kid and do it that way.
Well, not to end it on a downer, but I don't know if you can ever really reclaim the feeling that you had when you played those games.
Yeah.
Playing old Zelda games, playing Metal Gear Solid, they were like big formative experiences in my life. And as much as I've enjoyed going back to them and replaying them, I'm never, ever going to get that feeling that I had the first time I played them.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess I'll just hang myself. That's it, folks. Thanks for listening. Well, that'll do it, mate. I think it's time to move on to This Week Steve.
Are we doing This Week Steve?
We're doing This Week Steve. What is This Week Steve? Do you want to explain it?
This Week Steve is our staple mate feature at the end of our podcast, where everyone tunes off as we start talking about games that we've been watching and playing.
All the games we've been watching and the games we've been playing. What games have you been watching?
The game I can't do it. I've been watching Wandavision, which isn't a game.
Ooh, how far into it are you? Are you up to date with it?
Just a couple of episodes. No, I need to catch up. I only started 2 nights ago.
We're recording this on a Saturday after episode
7, wasn't it?
7.
Yeah.
7 aired. I watched it last night, and all I can say is,
It's really good though. I when I first put it on, I was like, because I didn't watch any trailers or really know anything about it at all, apart from what you said to me on the podcast, which I didn't really form like a solid vision of what I was about to watch.
A vision? A Wandavision?
When I started watching it, I was like, what on earth's going on here? And then I just sort of like took it for how it came as like sort of a comedy, and then it had like, the cool little TV adverts and things like that. Yeah. I was sold halfway through the first episode, and then at the end where it like starts referencing, I don't know what's going on, but it looks like she's like being held by someone or something, or she's in some sort of state. Yeah, and she's imagining all of this, which obviously is because she's able to go back in time in it, but. And yeah, I love it. It's like so many different things all at once that they're not really attempting to blend it, but it's not jarring in a negative way.
It absolutely works.
Yeah, it goes from the comedy to like reference what's actually going on, and it's like it's maybe a bit more Marvel in that sense.
Yeah,
and it does work. I've never seen something like be so opposite on TV that works so well. It still gels.
Especially with it being such a mainstream property as well. But I think, obviously I'm further along than you are, so I won't say anything about the plot. But I think it's so cool, especially considering Marvel films are routinely criticized, for being unoriginal. Oh, they're not even clever. They don't ever, blah blah blah. It's so creative, and it so masterfully blends the mainstream elements, like the popcorn shit with really artistically clever ideas.
Yeah.
And just executed masterfully. I know a lot of people have complained about the pacing of it, and I mean, you probably, because you're catching up with it, you won't be experiencing that as badly because you're not having to wait every week to see what happens next.
Yeah.
But I think the minute, for me, when I was watching it, I just kind of switched off the side of my brain that was like, give me the answers now, and just kind of engaged the part of my brain that was like, I am just enjoying this because it's really well written, really well shot.
Yeah.
And these are like superheroes, like when you look at the state of some of the stuff that DC's churned out, like they're so far behind what Marvel has now been able to achieve.
Yeah.
In terms of just building on their creativity and expanding outwards and having it all somehow make sense to like millions of people. Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, and it sits really well within the universe. I mean, I don't know where it's going, but I'm sure the answer that it will give, whether it's in this season or season 2 or whatever, but I'm sure when it comes up with that answer, I'm sure it'll sync really well with the actual universe. And for that start of the series to come to that conclusion that it still fits in the superhero multiverse to fit is like really well done, like fair play. And it gives me a lot of hope for like Disney and Disney Plus with the Marvel universe.
Yeah,
because I mean they've done a lot of good stuff. I think Disney Plus generally has been a really good thing, but it could easily not be a good thing. I actually thought the reason I didn't watch Wandavision at first because I thought it was just having not seen trailers. I imagined it being the story of what they did when they went to Scotland in Infinity War, was it? Yeah. And they just sort of went off. So I just imagined it just being those two like having a Costa and like mulling over the fact that they should go back and help everyone, or wonder what Tony Stark's doing and whatever. That's literally what I thought it was. So I was like, I ain't watching that yet. I'll watch it when I've like got half an hour to kill. But then when I watched it, I was like, no, this is like really creative, like nothing I've ever seen. So, and at this time, like after 70 years of television, like to have a TV show come up that isn't really like anything, but it is because it's all referenced, but it feels so new, like more new than anything I've seen in a few years, I think. So fair play, I love it.
I finished watching Barry.
Yeah. Oh yeah. How was it?
It was amazing.
Yeah.
So I had kind of watched the first 5 episodes and then in the interim moved house and sort of dropped off. And I was enjoying it, but it didn't sort of really grab me. And then our mutual friend, Tom, I was talking to him and he was like, oh, I've been watching Barry. And he hadn't even listened to the podcast. I think it was just a coincidence that he had been watching it at the same time as me, but he got all the way through it and he was like, Chris, like, you have to watch it. So I went back and literally the episode from where I stopped, like the following episode, it just ratcheted it up to just an astonishing like amount of tension. And it's seriously like there's only 2 seasons of it so far. It's one of the best TV shows I've ever seen.
You're the only person that I've heard anything about it.
It's so good. It's like really good. I mean, I was enjoying it up to when we were last talking about it, but finishing it off, I got the rest of the way through season 1 and 2, and it's like Breaking Bad levels of quality.
Nice one. I'll add it to my watch list. Is there only 2 seasons?
Yeah, and they're all like the episodes are like 30 to 40 minutes. Like they don't take long to get through.
Yeah. Nice one.
Yeah, you could watch it all in a couple of nights, and I recommend you do.
Yeah. I will. I recommend you watch it all
And you will watch it.
as quick as you possibly can. What you been playing?
I've been playing, I've still been playing Super Mario 3D Land. I haven't been playing Final Fantasy VII. I need to go back and finish it. And I played Bowser's Fury for the first time last night.
Yeah.
And couldn't put it down for about 4 hours. It's absolutely nuts. It's absolutely bonkers.
Oh,
but it's the same. It's like a mix between Super Mario Odyssey and Super Mario 3D World. It's like a big sandbox, but it has all of like the controls and moves of Super Mario 3D World, and you have to collect the equivalent of stars in the other games, like cat shines, to help Bowser Jr. Turn his dad back to normal, because Bowser is turned into like 100-foot fire-breathing monster. And so you'll be like, you just sort of run through, and it's all like little platforming sections across a big like sandbox map, collecting these cat shines, and then just at random intervals, Bowser will just emerge from the sea and just attack you, and it's like it has like this insane like metal soundtrack that's like, so the music's amazing in it. And like you'll be like scampering around, and like fire will be raining down on you from the heavens, and then once you've collected enough cat shines, you can activate this thing called the Giga Bell, which is like a power-up that turns you into a giant 100-foot Mario that's in like a giant cat costume. And you like fight this kaiju Bowser on the map, but suddenly, because like you're huge, the map is shrunken. It's like, it's tiny, and like it's turned into like a mini sort of platforming environment of its own. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah,
but
sounds really good.
It's really good, really, really fun, and it's just like a little add-on that was tacked onto the, ironically, the remaster of Super Mario 3D World for the Switch.
So Bowser's Fury isn't a remade game.
No, it's a new game.
It's a new game added onto a remaster.
Remake. Yeah, which I think is again, I don't feel bad about paying 50 quid for that, because I'm getting some new content with it, and it's really, really good new content. It's not just tacked on, So yeah, I've been playing that, and I mean, it seems pretty short. I think I played about 4 or 5 hours, and I was playing it with a sort of like completionist aspect, where I wasn't really moving on until I collected all the shines from one area. And I think I'm close to finishing it. So it's, it's not a huge amount of extra content, but it's very, very fun and very cool.
Yeah. That's the thing that bothers me with Mario, the completionist thing. Because when I play a platform, especially like Mario, I always feel like I have to find absolutely everything before I move on. That's how I've always played those games, especially like coming from like Spyro and stuff. But some games aren't really designed like that. Some games where they have that, but then you need to go forward to pick up an ability to go back. But platformers just generally confuse me, because I've played games like that before, and had that moment where I'm like, I can't get it, but I've tried to get it for like half an hour, and then been like, I don't want to play it anymore. I just give up because I can't continue my completionist thing.
I am kind of completionist. I collected all the stars in Super Mario 64.
Did you do Galaxy?
I've beaten Galaxy, but I didn't do all the stars in it. But I generally play them where I'll just play through the main story, and then I'll go back and collect everything afterwards if I want to.
Yeah.
But 3D Land, 3D World, and this, I've been trying to get everything as I go along. With 3D Land and 3D World, it's a lot easier, because there's generally only a certain amount of stars in each level, and it tells you how many there are, and they're usually like easily achievable in one playthrough. Whereas like some are like 64, like you have to go back because you have to unlock like the red like cat button, and like some extra additional power-ups that you can only unlock from like doing certain hidden secret levels. And then you can go back to older levels, and those things will now be available because you can get the flying cap or whatever.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, when I get loads of time, I'll dedicate myself, because I've heard Odyssey's like massive if you like go for the completionist thing.
It's got like 999 what are they, power moons. It's got 999 power moons in it, and I think I've done. I mean, I've done all of the levels. I've finished the game, and I've finished the secret levels, like the Champions Road additional levels at the end, and I've got maybe like 550 stars in it. So I like it because you can, especially with the Switch being handheld, you can put the telly on and you can just sit and sort of mindlessly run around the levels looking for power moons, and it's just a nice way to pass the time.
That is the good thing about Switch, I think. You can just sort of lounge about and half-ass watch TV. It's a very different experience, I think. Yeah. I got a Switch, didn't I?
You did. What did you get with it?
What do you mean? What did I get with it?
Like what games?
I've got Hades, so that's what I've been playing. And I just like re-downloaded original games. I intend to try and finish Breath of the Wild. I opened it yesterday to like sort of half excitement and half fucking mind-numbing boringness, to be honest.
You're breaking my heart.
I was in the middle of a shrine and I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. I like, didn't know where I was, so I was a bit like, I feel lost. I might start it again, but I'm like 40 hours in. I'm like right at the end. So I should just finish it.
I would say, because you know what, right? I don't think that you should play it with the intention of finishing it. I think if you're 40 hours in, you're picking it up now and you're like, oh, I don't know where I'm up to on it.
I've got one Divine Beast left, and the volcano one, and then I'm going to Hyrule Castle.
Does it save? Did you keep the game when you sold your Switch?
What do you mean? I've got it on. I didn't get it on physical.
Oh,
but
right.
I kept all my games anyway.
So you can still access your old save game?
Yeah, I backed it up.
Oh, right. Okay.
So yeah.
I would say just start it again, and just explore. Because when I started it again and played it last year, I didn't do any of the Divine Beasts until I'd already gotten the Master Sword. Like the first thing I did was I just ran through the map and I just found stuff. And I didn't really use. There was a couple of points where I was like, oh, like I can't work out what I'm supposed to do here. So I did use it. I did like watch a video on YouTube. But for the most part, I didn't use any guides or anything. I just kind of ran through and just found ways to sort of occupy myself and slowly build towards getting the Master Sword.
Yeah.
Without beating any of the Divine Beasts.
Yeah, I do think maybe like when in Games of Generation we talked about it, like those first 15 hours that I loved. And if I think back to like, you know, being on the plateau before you get your whatever, the flying thing, your glider, before you get that, I think I remember being like so excited, and like when I first jumped off the plateau I was like, oh, I don't know which way to go, should I go that way or that way? And like I loved it. I remember that being like, I was enjoying it as it was meant to be. But I think as I started to progress, I sort of started to feel like I was like maybe building a to-do list in it. Like of being like, oh, I need to go there and I need to do this. And I think as I started to do that, maybe I ruined it a bit. But I think it does sort of, it makes me play like that. I had loads of, like when we were talking about it, I was listening back to the game, I think it was the Games of Generation podcast, where talks about seeing that kid who gets up at like 8 o'clock and he's running around the town. I was listening to that and I was like, oh yeah, that was really good. And that's like a really good memory I've got of the game. I like loved that little bit. And there's loads of stuff like that, but I just found maybe I think I rushed it towards the end, and now I'm still in the phase of like rushing this game.
To me, it feels kind of hollow when you finish it, because you beat Ganon, you get the ending, and then it just sends you back to before you beat Ganon. There is no post game, which is why I'm kind of like, you can go and fight Ganon if you want, and then you'll just get sent back to where you were before that. But I don't really think it's a game that's designed to be finished. You know, I mean, obviously it is, because there's only a finite amount of things that you can do in the game. Eventually you will complete everything if you put enough hours in, but I think it's a much more fulfilling experience if it's just something that you just put on and you just do stuff in it. You know, just look around and just find things.
I think maybe I'll just I will go finish it off and then start again. I am quite excited to start it again, actually. So I'll maybe go finish it off, because I probably won't go back to that save, and then I can feel like I've finished it enough that when I start again, I could just piss around.
Yeah.
You know, it'll allow me to be like, no, I ain't going to that divine beast. I'm gonna go over here, whatever. And I'll just try and play it more in that exploring way.
It's definitely a piss around game, I think.
But yeah, that's my this week's Steve game. A game I haven't been playing.
A game that you're thinking of playing.
I've been playing Hades though, and Hades is sick. I've got to like the second bit where it starts getting a bit fiery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's really good. It's really funny. I love the dialogue.
It is. The dialogue's fantastic. The voice acting's amazing, isn't it?
What's the guy called? Is he called like Hypnos or something? The one who's like always to the left every time you like respawn. He's like a bit like sort of gremlin-ish. And he makes me laugh because it was like one of the bomber types. They blew me up, and he's like, "Oh, bloody hell! Can't believe you. Can't believe one of the bombers got you. Like, have you tried like moving away? Like when the bombs are next to you?"
Yeah, like responds to like how you've died and stuff. I always like it when you come on Charon's shop and
yeah.
and he's like, "Hello, Charon, mate. How's it going?" And he's just like, "Brrr."
I always give Charon the you know, like the is it like alcohol type of thing you get, and you can gift it to certain people to get extra benefits. I always give them to him. It's like, "Oh, Charon, mate, I've got you like this. Like, how's that going?" He's like, "Brrr."
Yeah. It's just always the same thing back. It's good. It's a good game. It's a bloody good game, that man.
It is really good. I don't know if I'll finish it because I think it's that kind of game where once I stop playing it, I find that I stop playing roguelikes.
I haven't gone back to it in quite a long time, to be fair. I never actually escaped.
Yeah, I remember you saying. I think like I'll keep playing it now. I'll keep playing it like before bed, and sometimes just lounging around on the TV. I'll try and put like like an hour in every day or something like that. I think I might get far, but maybe not complete it. But I don't really wanna. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that's it. Thanks to everyone who's been listening. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at @buttonchopspod. Please leave a review, as it helps us massively. And if you want to drop us a line, you can DM us on our social medias or email us at buttonchopspodcast@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at @BeesIsForFoon, and I also have a YouTube channel, Little Davey Reviews Things, which I haven't posted on in weeks now, so maybe don't look that.
It's been like a week. Just like the first week.
It's been like 3 weeks.
Has it?
Yeah.
All right.
Anything you want to add?
No. My Instagram and Twitter's @cleverwoot, and I'm looking forward to turning around my love for Zelda. Changing my negative attitude towards Nintendo.
You're gonna love it. Well, wicked jungle is massive. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Ta-ra.
Bye.
Ta-ra.
Bye.
Ta-ra.
Bye.
Ta-ra.